5 slides, although lots of them are going to be pictures. So, Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. Well, actually, just land between is what it literally means, in between land. But we always say in between what? Two rivers, the Tigress and the Euphrates. We sing in our song, a Tigress on top, Euphrates, because the Tigress River is to the northwest, and of course the Euphrates, blah, 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 northeast, and the Euphrates River is to the southwest. I apologize for my slip up and slub up right there. So we say a Tigress on top because we so often equate north with the top. I'm glad I'm not laggy for you. All right. Now, Mesopotamia is going to be home of some of the earliest civilizations of mankind. Now, I'm not going to say the earliest because we don't know exactly who was the earliest. We know in Egypt, we have people starting around the same time in civilizations. We have the same kind of thing in Mesopotamia. We have this also happening in China and India, all around the same time. Now, we're using this word civilization. We're throwing it all willy-nilly like we all know what the word means. So we need to define what a civilization is. And the textbook definition of a civilization is a complex society, meaning you have people living together with all sorts of complicated things added to it, such as having large cities, going and having an organized government so that there's law and order. Of course, people are going to make beautiful and amazing art to express themselves. We have religion, which may not always look like what you're familiar with religion, like with the belief in gods or goddesses or a god or goddess. It also could be devoid of gods, but a spirituality. So there are all sorts of different ways that could be. They will have class division, and you might be thinking, Senor Kenny, what is this class division? Well, class division means there are people that have power and wealth, and then there are people who have less power and wealth and influence, and people who have even less, and unfortunately, often people who have extremely little. The final part of a complex society, a civilization, is going to be language. Now, many of your textbooks, including your own that you're currently using for history, will say writing as opposed to language. But I want to caution you in that, folks, because writing is not a prerequisite for civilization. There are going to be many civilizations in world history that are going to have oral languages as opposed to written languages. And it's not like they're not a civilization until they figure out writing. You know, I just taught my 6th graders about the Slavs creating the Kievan Rus, which we would today call Russia, and how for the first like 300 to 500 years, their language was oral. It was just spoken. They didn't write, but they still had a civilization. They had kings and princes and castles and cities and art and religion. Next year, when you're in 6th grade, I'm also going to talk to you about the Inca Empire, which is going to be in the Andes Mountains of South America. An incredibly amazing empire with all of the crazy, amazing things that they could have started and invented. And they're going to use something called the quipu instead of writing, which is going to be knots and strings, but yet they're able to go look at those, interpret, and know. Now, all of these early civilizations that we're going to discuss are going to be in river valleys. Our do now question asked us, will I live in a river? Well, you guys got it totally. You guys were amazing with it. The biggest reason, of course, is going to be farming. Tons of people can be fed if you can farm lots of land. And let's face it, you know, Carson and Nick, they like to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So they're going to want to live somewhere that is going to produce the food that can provide them with that.
Yes,
Another thing that will be important is going to be trade. Now, we know that Gus is so strong and buff, but Gus isn't going to want to carry 1,000 pounds of things over land. You know, his arms are big and strong, but not that strong to go hundreds of miles with that. So Gus instead loads those thousands of pounds of materials and goods on a boat, floats it down the river, and then makes buku bucks trading that way. You got to earn those V-bucks somehow, right? Now, cities are going to be the centers of these civilizations. Now, we know that most people in this time frame are going to be farmers, but the governments, most of the art, religion is going to be focused around the city. So we're going to see cities growing up around the Tigris, Euphrates River, cities like Babylon and Uruk and Eridu and and Lagash and, Nineveh, Asher, and many, 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 many others. Now, we're primarily focusing these next couple days on Mesopotamia. Now, Meso is between. You sometimes might have heard of Mesoamerica, which is, Central America, that's between North and South America. Meso is between. You might have heard of a mezzanine floor, which is like a floor between two floors. Like if you have a first floor and a second floor, there's sometimes an in-between area for people to be able to do work or anything. And that's Meso, between. Now, Potamia is land, so it's in between land. And the land the rivers we're talking about that is between are the Tigris, like I mentioned before, and the Euphrates. You 100% have to guarantee know which one is the Tigris, which is the one to the northeast, and the Euphrates, which is to the southwest. You have to know those two rivers. Guarantee. Now, the flooding. And yes, they spelled Tigress wrong, whoever labeled that picture. I'm actually going to back up for 1 second so you can see this on the map, and it might give you a better picture. When we look at this map right here, we notice this textured area in the north. What do we think this textured area, what does that represent? All of this textured and dark area. You can please give me a me in the chat so that I can call on them and see what we think this kind of texture means on the map. Danielle, what do you think that means, darling?
I think it means like there's hills or like big mountains there.
Exactly. That is exactly what I'm looking for. Thank you, darling. And I'm sure Madeline and Ashlyn and Nick and everyone else was going to say that too. So awesome. Good work, students. So we have all of these mountains here. Now, as you know, mountains, they are tall. Yes. Now, in the winter time, Madeline, Kate, what is on top of mountains often in the winter?
Snow.
Snow. And she knows this, of course, because she likes to, with Grider, to go snowboarding down snowy mountains. And they do all sorts of cool flips and stuff like that. It's pretty awesome. She showed me a video on YouTube once. Now, there's lots of snow there. Now, Ashlyn, in the springtime, what happens to snow?
It starts to melt.
It starts to melt because we have these snowy mountains. And even mountains, when it gets warmer, it starts to melt. And the springtime in that northern mountainous area of Mesopotamia is very rainy. They're called the Zagros Mountains. And the rain falls on the snow. And we know rain is warmer than snow because if it was not, it would be snow itself. And that makes the snow melt. And then we have tons and tons and tons of water rushing down to the south. And as all that water rushes down, of course, it leaves behind the amazing thing called silt, as we have all of this river flooding. Now, silt is this beautiful, black, rich soil that is so packed with nutrients because it was at the bottom of the river for all of this time. And in there, it has all of the animal poo-poo and pee-pee in there that's gone and degraded down. It has all the animal skeletons and, things that have gone away. All the plant matter that is gone and biodegraded. So it has all of these things become an amazing natural fertilizer in the soil. So I know we think it's gross when we think of dead things that decomposed and pee-pee and poo-poo, but guess what, folks? It is the circle of life, and it makes the soil incredibly fertile, which means plants are going to grow so fantastically in there. So these rivers get totally way overboard with water, and then they flood and leave behind this mud, this silt there. And we're going to call this whole area the Fertile Crescent. Now, there's going to be one issue with this, one problema, one fly in the ointment. You see, Nick is a farmer, like everyone was at this time. And Nick doesn't know when to grow his crops because the flooding was unpredictable. Sometimes it flooded in May. Sometimes it flooded in April. Sometimes it flooded in June. Some years it didn't flood at all. One year it flooded at the end of March. So they didn't know when it would flood. And here's the problem Nick and all of the other farmers had. It is, when do I plant my crops? Because If I go plant my crops early, before the flooding, maybe I can plant a second set of crops and have lots and lots of food. But if it floods when my crops aren't ready yet, it might destroy all of my crops. So then, of course, Karachi says, well, I'm going to wait till the flood, and then my crops will grow great because of the silt. But then the flood winds up being very late or doesn't happen. Then Karachi's food doesn't get grown in time, and then poor Karachi doesn't have any food, So it's one of those things that Avery might wait a little bit, then thinking, okay, I don't think it's going to flood this year, plant his crops, and then it does, or maybe it doesn't. It's a tough challenge. Poor Austin, he thought his house was safe from the floods. He goes to the market one day, going and looking, to buy some stuff. He comes back, and of course the river's flooded, and there goes his house and his family. It's all gone. And now Austin's like, oh man, now I need to go find a new family. And so, of course, Austin does that. And then a couple of years later, thinking his new house was safe from the floods, then he finds it washed away again, and he has to get another family. Oh man, poor guy. So the floods helped the people because it made their land very fertile, but it hurt the people because, of course, flooding is dangerous. People could get drowned, get washed away, and plus it could wash away your food. So the unpredictability is a big problemo. All right. Now, here we see, I can't remember if this is the Tigress or the Euphrates. I'm pretty sure this is the Tigress. The water is low. We got it flooded. See, check that out. See how the water has gone way up. See how brown it is. I mean, there's some areas of green. Then see how lush and beautiful it is with the flood. So we see the flood is going to help a bunch, but it also is very dangerous. I just love that I have a picture of the same place with a flood and without a flood. All right, so that is going to be our notes for the day. Do we have any questions for this? And I